Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Stephen King podcast. This is episode 103, and I'm very happy to have my returning guest this time, and that would be Mr. Bryant Burnette. Hello, sir.
Hello, how's it going?
Not too bad. How about you?
Oh, can't complain.
Yeah, what's the temperature down in your neck of the woods?
I haven't checked today, but I'm going to guess 93.
Oh my God, we're at freezing here today in Alberta, so...
I would like to meet you in the middle on that.
Yeah, I would be quite happy with that. So we're going to be doing some shop talk today, and that would be a full-on spoiler review of Stephen King's latest book, The Institute. And this is an interesting book in that it has echoes of, for me, it had echoes of, but it also has quite a few differences. And it's interesting that King decided to go with a separate entity in this novel. I thought the tie-in to the shop would have been almost a given, but for reasons that he never really clearly articulated in any of the interviews that I got, he just decided to go with a different body of people who are running this whole experiment, which we find out through the course of the book is actually a global experiment, which is probably the most straining part of the novel, is that the whole world would agree to something like this. But we can get into that in a bit. I'm curious, what's your overall impressions of this book?
I can't honestly say that I was all that thrilled by it. I'm a little concerned, actually, as we talk about it, that I'm going to come off as sounding a lot more down on it than I actually am.
Right.
But I guess that's the truth about it, is that it just honestly didn't do much for me.
Okay.
There were parts of it that I loved, but on the whole, it's probably one of the lesser books that he's put out recently for me.
Right. That's interesting, and get into that why in a bit. But I tend to agree with you. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad book. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I think the characters are the strongest part, as usual, of the story. But this one just felt like King on cruise control. There was a lot of elements in this book that I felt were things that he's used in the past, Firestarter obviously being one of them. And the overall arc of the story, it didn't really go in any unexpected directions. It's pretty well played out the way I thought it was going to.
Yeah, I can see that. For me, the characters honestly didn't work all that well. Apart from, I really like Tim, the former policeman. I guess his story is one of redeeming himself after this incident that he had. And I was invested in his story right off the bat. And it actually felt to me like the book wanted to be about him. And then this story about the kids intruded on that and took it over.
And again, you make another interesting point, which I want to discuss. And we might as well get into it now, because I'm finding on the reviews that I've seen out there on the web that I think younger readers really are liking this book a lot more than his last few. And older readers are not as engaged with it as the younger readers, because I think for the younger readers, they see this more as a YA novel. And I can understand that attraction for them, because I, like you, when I started the book, because all the previews had dealt with Luke or whatnot, or the kids, I was actually thrown for quite a loop when the first couple of chapters were about this police officer, this disgraced police officer. So it threw me for a loop, and I thought we were just going to dive right into this story with Luke and the Institute. But I really did enjoy the stuff with the Tim character as well. So, and I think that younger readers, I think that they have the reverse or the flip experience. They're wondering, why is this stuff here at the beginning? I'm more interested in the kids. So I don't know if this might be too broad of a generalization, but that's sort of the read I'm getting in my limited surfing of the web.
I honestly haven't gone looking for all that many other reactions to it, but I can very well imagine that being the case. And just to be clear, I have no issue with anybody who enjoyed this book way more than I did. Who knows? The next time I read it, I might fall right in line with that. It wouldn't be the first time that had ever happened, but just on a first read for me, it just felt kind of flat and artificial, and I can totally see what you say about it reading like King on Cruise Control to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I mean, it hasn't happened. It doesn't happen very often with his books. So if it, every once in a blue moon, and I can't really think of another book before this where he's tread over the same ground quite as much as he has with this book, in my opinion. Again, like you said, these are our opinions. They don't necessarily reflect those of the universe, but I just really felt that this was borrowing a lot of elements from previous books that I've read by him.
Yeah, I can see that. And in some ways, it almost reads like what somebody trying to write a Stephen King book might come out like, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, a little bit, I guess. But that's I think so far we've been dwelling on the negatives, which is what people tend to do when they're talking about stuff. But I do have to say that, and it sounds like more than you did, I actually enjoyed the kid characters in this quite a bit. I don't think King has written a book with so many children characters in it for quite a while. And I thought that this actually was a nice ensemble of characters, and they all fulfill different functions. I just thought that, like, for instance, Luke, obviously being super intelligent, allowed King to cheat a little bit with his character because he was able to handle the situation that he was in a fairly mature manner compared to the way the other kids were because of his intelligence, even though King went out of his way at times to drive home the point that, this kid was still only 12 years old. Especially he said that he played with that a lot more in the chapters with his parents, I think, than he did once Luke actually got into the Institute. So I really did enjoy all the characters in this book, but I don't think you had quite the same experience.
I didn't dislike any of them. It's just, I guess the thing that I kept comparing it to, and I don't know if this was because I was actually comparing it to it or because I had read in marketing that it was compared to it to help sell the book, but I kept comparing it to it. And for me, these characters are maybe about
okay.
5% as engaging as, say, the Losers Club. But then I have to ask myself, is that just because I've lived with it for, I read it in 1990, so almost 30 years. If I had lived with the Institute for 30 years, would those characters mean as much to me? I don't know the answer to that. All I know is that on a first read, they didn't engage me at anywhere near the same level. But I didn't dislike them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that, like you said, that you had 30 years to live with the it characters.
Yeah, and then also, if you're in a position where you're comparing every book that comes out to it, that's not really fair.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I'm not as big a it fan as a lot of other people are. I do appreciate that. I know. See, you've got the Institute. I've got it. And there's one particular element that I just don't like in that story is that they don't remember. And that's actually why I enjoyed the second movie a bit. That aspect of the movie is that they did remember, because
how dare you?
I don't like stories where characters go through a journey and they come out the other side and they don't remember what they went through. Otherwise, what's the point of telling the story? And I realize that for some people, that dynamic of them not remembering is a real bittersweet thing. But for me, I always go back to the movie Heaven Can Wait with Warren Beatty, which is a remake of Here Comes Mr. Jordan. And if you don't know either of those movies, basically his character is taken out of his body too quickly by an angel because he didn't want him to suffer when he died. But he actually wasn't going to die in this particular accident. So now he doesn't have a body to go back to. So they put him in another body and he tries to get back to his old life. And by the end of it, he does. But at the very end, the angel says, but now you're not going to remember who you were. And I just don't like those kind of stories. So that's always been my big bugaboo about it. Because the thing about one is that Eddie's sacrifice should be remembered by those characters. And in the book, it's not, which I just really don't like that.
Here's the funny part about that. I have seen Heaven Can Wait, but it was so long ago that I don't remember anything about it.
Warren Beatty was a football player, and he ends up in the body of a millionaire, and he wants to become a football player again. So it's a comedy. So it's worth watching for sure. That's
a good point, though. I mean, I hear what you're saying.
Right. So there is that legacy of it. 30 years. I mean, I think everybody loves the characters. I think with these characters, I was invested enough that by the time they got to the climax of the story and Avery made his sacrifice, I got a little choked up. I got a little verklempt during that sections of the story. So I'm hoping that will resonate more as time passes and we get to, to re-experience the story. Maybe when we see the TV miniseries, those sequences will be quite emotional because I think the interplay between the characters, especially Luke, Avery, and Kalisha, and especially Kalisha, because she realizes that he's going to sacrifice himself during that part of the story, I think that could be quite powerful. And I'm looking forward to seeing that dramatized.
Yeah, hopefully it'll turn out well. I can absolutely imagine the television version turning me into a bigger fan of it because to some extent that's happened with the Mr. Mercedes books already.
Oh,
because those are on the lower end of the King spectrum for me, and the TV show has made me want to revisit them. So I can imagine that happening with the Institute also. But the scene you're talking about with Avery, he probably was the standout of the kid characters for me. Although I really wish King hadn't felt the need to have people call him the Avester. I could have lived without
that. And I think that's why the younger readers probably like it. But that's interesting. I got the vibe, and maybe I'm reading too much into this, but Luke and Avery was like Frodo and Samwise to me. And Avery was like the Samwise Gamgee character of this story because he might not have had the brains to figure things out exactly, but he's the one that ended up carrying the water for the most part in this story. So really, if Luke hadn't have left, he probably would have been better served to have stayed with the others and perform this connection that they made with all the other institutes around the world and blow things up real good.
Yeah, that's an interesting analogy. I hadn't thought of that, but I like that.
Alrighty, so let's talk about the other half of the equation, which is the villains in the story. And I think for me, this is probably the most problematic part of the story because I do understand what King was trying to put across about how we be complacent, especially if something's been in place for a long time. Standards tend to become laxer. We're not as diligent, but it seemed to be overplayed, or it really seemed to be set up just to allow the kids to be able to do the things that they needed to do in the story. I don't know how you felt about them.
I think we're probably on pretty much the same page with that. I took the Institute, the bad guys, as being a reflection of King's approach to evil in general, which is to generally portray evil as being just lame and ineffectual when you get to the bottom of things. If you think about, I guess we can do spoilers here for other King books as well. I don't want to go too deep in case somebody who hasn't read, say, The Dark Tower is listening. But if you think of the way the Crimson King, the way his story ends, basically you get to the end of it.
The stand.
Yeah, exactly. He's the other big example. And the feeling there is that's King's feelings about evil is that it basically just sucks. And so, you get the idea of the Institute, and it's just people that suck at their job. The thing is, I don't know if I feel like that's good storytelling. I feel like it's good philosophy, but I don't know if I feel like it's good storytelling.
Or it doesn't make for good dramatic conclusions because people want the big showdown between the good guys and the bad guys. And King's done it a couple of times, as in the examples that we mentioned, where the bad guys, they basically are their own undoing in large part. Once you push back hard enough, they just cave in, which in real life is, like you said, is King's philosophy. He's done that several times, and it's an interesting one. But from a dramatic standpoint, you want that Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader showdown at the end of your movie. And that's why I think one of the reasons why the Shawshank Redemption works so well is that Darabont had the wherewithal to keep the Warden as the same character throughout the story, so that when we got to the end of the movie version of it, his comeuppance was very delicious. Whereas in King's story, more realistically, I believe, the Warden kept on changing every couple of years, which in real life I think would happen or happens. It would be very unusual for somebody to stay in a position of power like that for a long time, or probably they wouldn't even want to. I think people that are in those kind of positions look at those jobs as a stepping stone to something bigger. So it'll be interesting. And I've got shades of that from the trailers that I'm seeing for Dr. Sleep. I think Flanagan's going to retool the climax of the book from Dr. Sleep to address that a little bit more, because it looks like the girl is going to be involved in the climax of the story in the movie, whereas in the book she was pretty well off the page. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But in this particular book, yeah, they just basically stumble over their own feet and give the victory to the kids on a silver platter.
More or less, yeah. What the whole thing comes down to is that they just aren't paying attention enough to notice a kid tunneling out under a fence.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, they had no internet and whatnot and all this kind of stuff. And all these institutes were being run and staffed by people who were kind of on the margins of society that didn't really have anything better to do with their lives, basically, which I found interesting as well. I don't know if that's King drawing more parallels to today's government or not. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. One thing that didn't occur to me until just now, actually, is that I can buy the notion that the people running the institute, you know, the actual physical institute where these particular kids are being kept, I can buy the fact that they become complacent and sort of stop being effective at their job. I don't know if I can square that with the idea that the larger body that operates the institute has enough wherewithal to basically fund informants all over the place.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can put those two things together all the way. Maybe it makes sense. Maybe it doesn't. I'm struggling with it a little bit.
Yeah, I'm struggling with the worldwide concept of the Institute as well, that there's these shops all over the world as well. I just can't believe that something that global would stay that secret that long, because, you know, this has been going on for like 50 or 60 years, according to the book. And
some of these, the Illuminati, though.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, got to go a little Dan Brown on that part of the story if you're going to.
Well, I think that stuff is actually baked into this novel, which is, I think, maybe one of the things that's tripping me up about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe.
Not that Stephen's work has always been free of it. It's there in other places if you look for it, but
right. But regardless, but regardless of that aspect of the novel, the part that the most chilling part of this scenario, though, is that people are willing to look the other way when terrible things are being done to other people. And that is something that's very real. That's, to me, is the core and the definition of what evil is all about. And we see that in this story, that these adults could do these things to these kids and rationalize it, that it's for the survival of the human race. I mean, that thinking is... it's just that following orders mentality that allows for these terrible things to happen. And it's all it takes for evil to succeed is for other people to be complacent. And again, well, before I make my next point, I just wonder what you think about that. Was that the part of the story that bugged you the most or bothered you the most, I guess I should say?
I'm not sure I had thought about it in that way, but now that I am thinking about it somewhat on the fly, what I'd say to that is it does bother me, but if anything, I don't think the book takes that far enough. I think what the book is saying is that, yes, people will turn their eyes the other way, but only a few of them. Most people won't. I'm not sure if I believe that anymore.
Okay. Well, you are thinking on the fly, so yeah. And in today's climate, I can understand that viewpoint quite a bit. So,
hey, I'm an American, baby.
Well, even in the world, because what's going on in your country in particular, you guys might think that this is just your problem. But as somebody that doesn't live in,
it's definitely.
I don't live in your country, but it's affecting us as well. And it's seeping into our politics. We're seeing the same sort of behaviors. If you look at England with Brexit, it's the same scenario. I mean, they've even got a guy in power that's basically a clone of Donald Trump in appearance, if nothing else, for bad haircuts.
Yeah. I think maybe what I'm getting at is that it feels to me like King wanted this book to be a really angry scream about that sort of thing.
Right.
And I don't know if it came off that way. I think maybe it's a little too meek.
Oh, so you wanted more brutality. Is that what you're saying?
Not brutality necessarily, but I don't know. I'm thinking on the fly. I'm not entirely sure where I'm going with it. So
Right. And the next point that I was going to make was that evil flourishes when good turns the other eye, but also keeping in with King's theme that evil's pretty ineffectual once you face it down, is all it took was this one caretaker woman who, really not for any altruistic reasons beyond the fact because she was terminally ill, she was trying to make amends for her life, which I think a lot of people try to do when they realize that their time is almost up. But she really brought down this whole power structure, really, and it wasn't that difficult again. And that just shows, I don't know if King was just trying to illustrate, or maybe I'm reading too much into this, but that particular story point, but it doesn't take a lot to face and stare down evil, which I don't know if I believe that in the real world. I think it's a lot more, there's a lot more gray. It's not as black and white as stories make it turn out to be.
There are some aspects of grayness in this book. For example, I would say the vast majority of the book you can probably interpret from the perspective of saying that this group did genuinely think that they were working for the greater good. You know, it's not like their big plan was to kill kids. They thought that they were protecting the world. So there's some grayness there.
Mm-hmm.
And that probably is something you can extend to a decent amount of the actual evil in the world, is that, you know, most people aren't just serial killers. They think they're doing something for the right reasons.
Right.
So I think there's some of that working there.
Yeah. So it's cool that under the surface, there's all these ideas percolating that King has put in between the lines, and it's up to us to take them away and mull over on our own. I was curious about your reaction to some of the tie-ins that this book had to other Stephen King mythology. There's references to low men in black cars, I guess you could say. And at times I was getting a Breaker vibe from some of these kids, and they seemed almost like rejects from the Dark Tower movie, the opening sequences there. So that was interesting. Then there was this whole thing about precogs at King brought up, which is not something he's tackled directly before. And I don't know if that's going to be the springboard for another story down the road or not, but I thought he was opening up a very interesting door when he brought on that concept of precogs. What did you think about that stuff?
I didn't necessarily get the feeling that he was setting this up to be continued, but now that you pointed out, yeah, I could see that. I didn't really take this as being super connected to other King books in that way. I think he was trying to go for a more standalone thing here. But one question I found myself asking toward the end of the book is the moral of the story, to the extent there is one, ends up being, hey, nobody can see the future. Nobody knows what's going to happen. And I got a little worked up thinking, okay, but how does that work with the dead zone? Because those are polar opposite looks at that equation.
Yeah, I think he addressed that with that one particular politician, Rothstein, or I can't remember, or Rubenstein, or whatever the guy's name was. I think time is like eddies or currents, and at certain points there's high points or pressure point moments that, like the Kennedy assassination, for example, or in the dead zone, the Greg Stilson storyline. I think that there's certain moments or crisis points that somebody like Johnny Smith from the Dead Zone can react to, though he was reacting to smaller things as well, which is true. But I think the things that Johnny were reacting to were much more local because he had to physically be in contact with that individual. So that's, I think, a bit different than what these precogs were sort of, I just got the impression they were kicking back in lazy boys by the pool, like zoning out or whatnot, and just tripping and picking up vibes. So I don't know. I get your point, though.
All I can think of is the precogs in Minority Report that lay around in a pool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I got that vibe as well. But it's an interesting thing that King has opened up. And the ending was, to me, open enough that a sequel could happen. I don't know. I don't know if King has the ambition or the desire to do a sequel to that. And I personally think I would rather see him move on to something else. It'll be interesting to see what the Holly Gibney book, what's it called? It Bleeds, or
If It Bleeds.
If It Bleeds. I'm wondering if that's going to have any tie-ins to this story. from that perspective.
It's possible because they are set in the same universe. There's a couple of little things in this book that tie them in together.
Yeah, so that's interesting, and we'll have to see how that plays out within the universe of Stephen King books. Like, if I take this book and compare it to something else that I'm reading, it's still a hell of a good book. I really enjoyed it quite a bit and had a lot of fun reading it. But when you're a fan, you tend to get into the between the cracks and try to wedge into things that the average reader wouldn't care about, and that's why we're fans, for better or worse, I guess. I do feel that this was like King on cruise control a little bit. I really did love the characters quite a bit, and I got, a little choked up from time to time. But like you, there was this, as an older adult, my interest on the kids was not as high as it was with the adult characters, like the Tim character, the police character, as it was with the kids. Though I did like the Avester.
Oh, the Avester.
The Avester, the poor Avester. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see from a casting perspective how this TV miniseries will work out, because kid casting is so tough. And we've seen that to my mind, like with The Shining twice. I don't think the kid that in the original movie was that engaging. And I thought the kid in the TV series just, unfortunately, physically had that open mouth fish look that just was very distracting.
I'm going to turn down the bait to trash the kid from the TV version of The Shining, but I'd really like to. I'm going to turn it down, but regretfully.
Okay. Yeah, and nothing against the person that was playing the actor at that time. It was just, there's limitations to what the camera can capture, and unfortunately, that was very distracting. As I'm unabashedly on a Mike Flanagan hype train, but if you look at the kids that he cast in The Haunting of Hill House, and even the kid that plays the small scene in the Dr. Sleep trailer is a little girl who's getting surrounded by the True Knot. Those kid actors that he casts, like he's got such a good visual eye. Like that girl just looks like she's innocence and naivete of a young child and a girl, and she just looks like the visual Norman Rockwell encapsulation of what a little girl, like a pretty little girl, would look like. And I just think Flanagan has such a good eye for those kind of things, and I hope that whoever's doing the casting for the Institute miniseries has the same eye.
Yeah, I mean, casting cannot be undervalued or overvalued, I guess is what I'm going for there. I remember somebody once saying that casting is about 50% of filmmaking. And if anything, that seems low to me.
Mm-hmm.
If you cast a project like that well, then you're going to succeed more often than not. I mean, look at it. There's another great example there.
Yeah.
Or Stranger Things.
Yeah. Yeah. And for it applied to not just the kid cast, but the adult cast as well.
Yeah.
I think structurally, the second movie hampered the adults by doing the cross-cutting between them and the kids. If they were going to take that approach in the second movie, or if they were going to take that approach, they should have started with it in the first movie. Because what you end up is, now when you take those two movies, you've got a disproportionate amount of it is related to the kids, and like say 2/3, and maybe 1/3 of it's for the adults, where the balance is skewed, not correctly, in my opinion, even though I know the kids' portion of the story is obviously more interesting. I think most people agree on that. But I just think that, that second half of that movie, there was just too much cutting away from the adults to make me care about them as much as I should have as when they were the kids. That's a whole other thing.
It was a strange movie because it was at the same time way too long and way too short.
Yes.
And I don't know how many movies you can say that about.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that odd dynamic between the adults and the kids in the second It movie is a little bit what's happening in this book as well. Like we said, like with the bookend sequences with the adults, with the kids. So it's interesting. And I think that it's interesting that King structured this book this way, where I'm thinking that if he might have broken it up and sprinkled the Tim character more over the course of the book, it might have flowed a bit better. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think it made a big difference because he's obviously not being represented in a earlier form in the story, but I just found that it was weird transition going from him to the kids and then back to him.
I could be dead wrong about this. I have no idea, but it felt a little bit to me as if he wrote the opening 40 pages or whatever it is with Tim separately from everything else, probably beforehand. Got to the end of that section, didn't quite know where to go with it, put it to the side, and then later on put the stuff with the kids together with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, I have no idea. I could be completely wrong about that. But to me, they didn't feel completely connected just stylistically necessarily.
Yeah. Right. And the final thing that I'll talk about here is that King sets up when Luke is kidnapped that there's this particular team. I don't know whether they're Alpha or Ruby or whatever the heck they were called. And I thought that those team members would get their comeuppance from Luke or even from the Avester, but that never really, the way it played out in the book I found was a little anticlimactic. And again, it's that whole idea of how Darabont compressed all the wardens into one in Shawshank, and he gets his comeuppance. I was looking for that in the story, and it never happened. And I was like, I mean, they did, but it didn't play out in a way that I found the most dramatically satisfying.
I hadn't thought of that, but that's a good point.
All right, so yeah, so basically, I think we were both saying that we like the book. It's probably not our favorite recent Stephen King book. I know that I enjoyed Elevation. I believe I remember correctly that I enjoyed Elevation a lot more than you did.
Yeah, I felt pretty similar to Elevation the way I felt about this, which was, it's okay.
Yeah.
It turns out Stephen King on Cruise Control is still pretty good.
Yeah, and I definitely enjoyed The Outsider a lot more.
The Outsider is one that has held up well for me as I've thought about it.
Right.
So I'm curious to see if something similar will happen with The Institute.
Yeah, we'll have to see. And the curious thing about that adaptation is that they have a totally different actress or actor playing Holly Gibney in The Outsider versus the Mr. Mercedes series, which is too bad because I would have liked to have seen a continuity connection there between those two series, but that's not going to happen. But
that was my initial reaction too. And I've still never seen the actress who will be playing her in the HBO series. I haven't seen her in anything, but she's getting Oscar buzz for the movie where she's playing Harriet Tubman. So that's probably going to turn out pretty well, would be my guess.
I would think so. Yeah, for sure. And it's another turn of the wheel of Ka, I guess you could say, another level of the tower that different actor is playing the same character. So is there anything else you want to say about the Institute before we close this one down? Or
he scans his notes to see if there was anything. Oh, I got sidetracked and didn't mention. I really liked the part where Orphan Annie talked about her favorite conspiracy theory radio host talking about Jerusalem's Lot. I like that. I like the idea that all the art bells of that universe are all hyped up about the things that happened in Salem's Lot that nobody knows the truth about. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. Man, I wish they would make a Salem's Lot sequel with the two characters that survived at the end. Their names are escaping me, the writer and the boy. I'd love to see a series about them going around killing vampires, but that would be cool.
Yeah.
And it would work well for TV, too.
They're probably going to do that on Castle Rock or something like that. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe. Season 3. We'll have to see. The other thing I forgot to mention, and King does this in every story, and I really like these moments, is where there's like a minor character that comes in and basically performs a Good Samaritan act. In this particular case, when Luke's in the train car and that dock worker lets him go and then throws him a bag of food. I know it's a storytelling convenience, but those moments always give me a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling in my heart that there's people out there that will play the part of be a good Samaritan, help somebody that's down that they don't know anything about, and they're just basically operating on their gut instinct.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Those moments always, I realize it's a story convenience, but they just also make me feel good about the human race, and that's always a good thing.
Well, Stephen King's good at that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's our discussion on the latest Stephen King book, The Institute. I hope you guys all found this enjoyable. And Bryant, if you got a little bit of time, if there's anything else King-wise you wanted to talk about, I can throw a couple of topics at you and see how you react to them. But
yeah, let's do it.
Okay, I'm thinking of working on colors here. We got gray for gray matter, green for In the Tall Grass, and blue for the Stand Blu-ray. And that will be it'll be a podcast before this. So before this one, I'm going to talk about those three things in depth. But I just wanted to get your reactions to gray matter. I saw your response to Lilia's thoughts on it over at the Lilia's library, and it was like mine. I think I felt rather gray about the whole endeavor.
Yeah, I felt pretty black about it. To be honest,
well, at least you're not red.
True. I wanted to love Creepshow, and maybe I still will. Who knows? But to me, it just felt really cheap.
Yeah, that doll just really kills everything. I mean, I actually like the opening title scenes because that's all kind of CGI. That's cool in the comic books, but that puppet is atrocious.
It's really bad. And I don't know why you would do that when you have the ability to do better than that. Yeah. I think the idea there was that, all right, let's prove how devoted we are to practical effects.
Right.
Okay, great. But then you do CGI in the episode. So I don't know. I'm probably more down on it than I should be, to be honest. It was okay, I guess. I just somehow was expecting more.
Yeah. And Adrienne Barbeau, she may age, but her hair stays the same.
Yeah, and, it was nice to see her. She's always good.
She's got that dark, luxurious hair. I assume she must be dyeing it or shading it or whatever. But man, that hair looks as vibrant as it did when she was back on Maude. I tell you.
Yeah, so it wasn't totally without its charms, but
yeah,
I was disappointed.
Yeah, it was, and you look at, except for the boy, who I didn't mind until maybe like the climax of the episode. It just felt really flat, or his performance felt really flat in that particular instance. But you've got actors like Tobin Bell and Giancarlo Esposito, Chicken Man from Breaking Bad. So you're going in with really high expectations, and man, the focus was just, I don't know, it was in the wrong place. I can't say exactly what, it just didn't have the right vibe. I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. It was too dark. It just felt like everything was filmed from a block away. I just couldn't get into that story at all. I found the second story, the Josh Mellerman story about the dollhouse, a lot more effective, but
it was considerably better and would have been even better than that if it had had an ending, which it didn't.
Yeah, which was kind of weird. So it's kind of like, so this is going to happen again or what? Yeah, I guess.
What I've read about the series is that the episodes are, and by that I think I mean the individual stories, that they're being filmed in about 3 days, which is really, really fast.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, my feeling here is that Shudder probably just isn't spending that much money on the series. No. Probably because they can't afford it.
Yeah. Well, like you see in the closing credits, there's quite a bunch of different sponsors for the show. So I feel like each of them must sort of only be kicking in $20,000 each or something like that.
Maybe. The good news on that is, if that's true, my guess is that Creepshow is going to be a big hit for Shudder.
Probably.
Because I had never subscribed to it before this.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine I'm the only person in that boat. So if it makes enough money for them, maybe the second season, they'll put a little bit more resources behind.
Yeah. I mean, it's a cheap channel. Like it's $5 a month, but
yeah, true.
Boy, there's a lot of garbage on there. And that's the problem with horror in general. Like my tolerance for bad horror is decreasing with each passing year. I just got better things to do than to wade through all these endless slasher and whatnot types of or B budget movies, because there's there's so many other things to do nowadays. So I just don't have the patience for or the time for that anymore. So, but yeah, so it was disappointing. I was expecting more from that episode. I'll have to check out the other ones, but I can say that I've been fortunate enough to see In the Tall Grass and that is a solid addition. And I'll get into that more in my other episode. But it's solid. It's not going to blow your socks off, but it's, you're not going to, I don't think you'll walk away feeling disappointed either. It's got some really cool stuff in it. So definitely worth, that will definitely be worth seeing. So Netflix has got a pretty good track record so far with Stephen King adaptations.
Yeah, they're 2 for 2 on the ones I've seen.
Yeah. And then just quickly say that the Blu-ray for The Stand is pretty impressive. I was really surprised at the quality bump in the picture from that. And apparently they did go back to the original negatives, which is good because I was afraid they were just going to upscale or upsource original Blu-ray or DVD release. But there's definitely a noticeable quality improvement in that Blu-ray. And the hardest thing to get used to is the fact that it was filmed in a 4:3 ratio. So you're watching it, you go, I wish this was widescreen, but I guess we'll just have to wait for the new version.
I'm kind of a purist. If it was filmed in 4:3, I'd rather watch it in 4:3.
Yeah, I am too.
I wouldn't have minded if somehow they had put 2 versions on there and you could make that choice for yourself. Yeah. I got the Blu-ray in. I haven't even unwrapped it yet, but all the reviews that I've read of it have said, hey, this looks good.
Yeah, it's the color timing is quite a bit different, and I don't know who was involved in that, but this one has a lot more pop to it than the DVD, that's for sure. Even like you'll just see it like when you compare hazmat suits, it's quite apparent, and I don't know which one is the truer version or vision, but the Blu-ray definitely pops. And it's also, the Blu-ray is the what's known as the artisan cut. So there's some additional scenes that were cut, not a lot, just mostly around the rape scene in the desert and Dana's death in Las Vegas. Those 2 scenes play out a bit longer. So some of the graphic elements of those were cut for 8 by ABC, have been reinstated. The only real disappointment is there's not any really up-to-date special features on it. It has the commentary that was on the original, and it has just like a 6-minute electronic press kit behind the looks. I'm thinking now that I'm wondering if this is going to get a re-release when the new Stand series comes out next year, and maybe more special features will be added to it at that point. But
if so, I'll probably buy it again.
Yeah, same here.
I say probably. I'll definitely buy it again. Who am I kidding? Yeah. I'm the guy who will happily buy the Langoliers if they put that out on Blu-ray.
Yeah, so that would be tough because I think the special effects are in SD. I don't know how they'd have to recomposite them and all that stuff, but we'll see. I don't know if that will come to pass, but Stephen King's hot now, so they'd probably re-release his laundry list if they could make a buck on it right now.
Well, they know there are guys like me that'll buy literally anything. So
This is true. And again, it's heady days. The Stephen King renaissance continues unabated, and probably this year is busier than last year. When we've got the Mercedes season 3 is kicked in. We should have, I don't know when The Outsider's coming out, but we do have, I think that's probably not till next year, but we have Castle Rock season 2 starting soon. So yeah, it's, and we know that Dr. Sleep's coming in November, and I'm probably unrealistically hyped for that movie because I think Flanagan's going to blow people away with his merging of the cinematic and novel versions of that story, and I think he's going to honor both of them. And I really like the approach that he's taken, because say what you will about Kubrick's version, that's the version of the story that most people from pulp culture know. So it'd be crazy to ignore that just to honor a version of the story that not quite as many people are familiar with.
I think the only way to do that would be to remake The Shining first, which would be fine by me. I mean, I love Kubrick's movie. I love King's book. I love Dr. Sleep, the book. Hopefully I'll love the movie Dr. Sleep. I'm happy with more or less whatever they do.
Yeah,
as long as it's better than the miniseries.
Yeah. I'm really keeping my fingers crossed too. Like, I like the casting of Ewan McGregor, but in some ways I think he's a safe choice for this role. But I'm really interested to see what Rebecca Ferguson does with Rose the Hat, because she looks prepared.
Yeah, and they haven't shown much of her in the trailers yet. So, but I mean, there's no chance she won't be great.
Yeah, she looks awesome. And I like the eye glow at night in the night scenes as well. I think that's a nice touch that I don't believe was in the book. But yeah, I get excited because they show that quick little clip of the baseball player kid coming to the side of the car, and we were wondering if those kind of scenes were going to make it into the movie. And I've heard secondhand from one of the YouTube channels that they know somebody who's seen the movie and they say it's really good. He said the first half of the movie it's really good. He says, but then they say like the second half is just amazing. So I'm hearing nothing but good things. But like we've heard with how people were excited before that saw it Pet Sematary at one of the film festivals, and then we all saw how that landed with a bit of a thud when it actually hit the public that didn't quite embrace it with the same enthusiasm as the earlier reviewers did. So
yeah, that was just kind of a
yeah, for sure.
I finally watched that a second time, by the way, and still felt exactly the same about it.
Yeah,
not terrible, but I just don't quite know why it was made, to be honest.
It doesn't have a heart. That's what it comes down to it for me. But
no, that's pretty much true. But here's hoping Dr. Sleep will not be the same thing. I'm pretty much on the same level with you on that. I'm pretty excited for it.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's going to pan out.
Yeah, I love that first trailer, that teaser trailer. I just think I don't know who cut that together, but this music selection, I just love that when that pipe organ kicks in with the shine a little light on me. Fear is very gothic and romantic in the gothic sense, and got that Phantom of the Opera vibe to it. It just gives me those old Universal movie vibes from it. So I'm really hoping that Flanagan, based on what he did with The Haunting of Hill House and Gerald's Game, is really going to elevate Dr. Sleep.
Well, like we talked about when we did the podcast on his body of work, as far as I'm concerned, he hasn't missed yet.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't see any reason to think this is going to be the first one.
Yeah, same here.
It certainly doesn't sound like it based on the advance word.
Right. Alrighty. So is there any other King things that you wanted to? I have one, and I don't know if I should bring this up because I'm just going to be like stirring the pot on something that probably doesn't need to be stirred. What the heck? I'll do it. And if you think I should cut it, we'll cut it.
If I don't like it, I'll just hang up.
I'm curious to see people's reactions to casting announcements. We all saw how people got their knickers in a knot when Idris Elba was confirmed as Roland the Gunslinger for the Dark Tower movie. And yet, here we come with another version of The Stand, where in the book, Randall Flagg is described in a certain way, but they've cast a non-conforming character again, much like they did with Jamie Sheridan in the original version. And this time we've got the other Skarsgård's brother playing one of King's most famous villains. So that's, that family, they're really keeping the King villains in the family. So you've got these two brothers, one's played Pennywise and the other one's going to play Randall Flagg. But I'm not hearing any complaints about his casting. And I just find that interesting.
Do I interpret what you're saying correctly as being that you feel like Randall Flagg is a black man?
Yeah. At least in the stand. At least in the stand, he is.
No, I don't think so. I've never taken it that way. I think when he's referred to as a black or a dark man, that's referring to the fact that his face is always in shadow.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Because
I've been carrying a lifelong misconception.
It doesn't matter either way. Well, not necessarily. It's all in how you perceive it.
Yeah, I guess. Anyhow, that might just be me. Maybe I've totally misread that, like you said.
Well, no, it's interesting. I think I haven't seen any complaints about Skarsgård at all on that, which
I have. Some people say he's too pretty.
Really? Yeah. See, I could kind of go there. The person that I always wanted to play Randall Flagg, I always wanted Tom Cruise to play Randall Flagg.
Tom Cruise, wow.
Just because.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I know. Well, he's got that. Obviously, he's charismatic.
Yeah.
But there's also that undercurrent of untrustability and danger to him that really not that many movies have taken advantage of, but it's there.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's got to do with that. But, Skarsgård played something like that on True Blood.
Yeah, for sure.
So he'll probably be pretty good for it. I'm not sure how I feel about Whoopi Goldberg. I like her.
Yeah, she's a good actor. I think, unfortunately, I mean, it's just a byproduct of her being on The View that she's become so much more of a personality now than before. But when she was acting before, she was a good actor. I never had any problems with what she had done.
Oh, yeah, no, she's great. I mean, I know you're a Star fan.
Yeah.
I am too. What she does as Guinan is not all that far from playing Mother Abigail.
Yeah.
So I think she'll be good for it. I don't
Want her to be a distraction.
know how they're going to convincingly make her as old as Mother Abigail is supposed to be.
Yeah,
We'll see.
Yeah, they might even CGI it a little bit. Who knows? But she's wearing the white dreadlocks on the View right now, so you can see a clip of her with.
Yeah,
and that's just the beginning of her makeup, right? So that's the base. But
I would think so.
yeah, I thought Ruby Dee was a very good Mother Abigail as well. I'm thinking of other actors to play Randall Flagg. I can see Robert Downer Jr. actually doing quite a good job with it because he's got that carnival showsman vibe to him.
Yeah, I think at this point it would be tough to get him in that role just because I think you'd have a hard time
not seeing
making people not like him.
Yeah, well, which is kind of what you want.
That's true.
Yeah,
it's true.
Also, like obviously, dream choice would be like somebody like Daniel Day-Lewis. That would be fantastic. And if he was still alive, because of the work that he did on the Joker, Heath Ledger, I think, would make a good Flag too. But
I would have loved if they had gone back to McConaughey and given him a second crack at that. Because I don't necessarily feel like he did was the problem.
No, I think what they wrote for him to do was the problem.
They wrote something for him to do.
Well, the stuff that he did with the girl and saying hate and stuff like that. That's not Flag. That's not Flag. That's not Flag.
No,
it's
not.
That's not his style. So a little too overt. But yeah. There's a lot of actors that could really bring an interesting interpretation to Randall Flagg for sure. The rest of the casting, is it James Marsden or Marsters? I'm never sure. He's not a good choice in my mind for Stu Redman, but we'll see.
I like him, but yeah, I'm with you on that. And he's a good bit older than the girl playing Franny.
Yeah.
Which is the case in the book also, but
yeah. Actually, I don't
know how that's going to play these days.
Yeah, that actually might work a little bit better, actually. It'll be interesting to see how the actor that plays Harold Lauder works out this time, because I think from the original, that's one of the weaker links, along with Franny in the original version. So they really need to nail that character as well.
Well, I like the kid that's playing Harold in this. He's good. He should have been used more in it.
Okay. Who? Oh, it's the guy that played Harold.
Patrick Hockstetter.
Yeah. He's got a good look. Yeah, I think he'll do a good job for sure. Yeah, that'll be interesting. And I still haven't heard who's going to play the trash can man. Have you?
I haven't seen anything. The only thing that I've heard is that people think that may be what Marilyn Manson is playing.
Yeah. Because
he's said that he has a part in it.
Yeah.
And it feels like he would be good for I've never actually seen him act, but supposedly pretty good.
Okay. I could even see Matt Frewer coming back and redoing that role, because that's an ageless character. So, and I thought he was quite good in the miniseries. So, Max Headroom himself.
Yeah, I'll go without comment on that.
Okay. All right. I don't want to put you on the spot too much. All right. So I might have put my foot in the mouth about Randall Flagg then. I'm pretty sure I was thought right that he was black in The Stand, but maybe I'm wrong. I'll have to go reread that again. Any excuse, I guess. But
yeah, the way I've always interpreted it is not necessarily the only way to interpret it.
Yeah.
So
yeah. All righty. Well, I think that's all the current King stuff percolating right now. And is there anything else that you're thinking about that hasn't been talked about? Or
it's not King per se, although a couple of the stories are half his, but Joe Hill's new book comes out in just a few days.
That's right.
So that's always a good thing.
Yeah, Full Throttle. So that'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That will include In the Tall Grass, by the way, which will be nice, because I think the only previous version was through a magazine, an audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's cool. At this point, we're never more than about a week or two away from something Stephen King related happening.
Yeah.
So
it's
busy times if you're a King fan.
Yeah, it's straining on the pocketbook, that's for sure. And I've pre-ordered the Blu-ray release of the Haunting of Hill House 2, because there's extended cuts of some of the episodes and whatnot, and I just have to see that. So
I've got that on the way as well.
Oh, cool. You know what? We should probably do a review if you're up for that down the road, because I know it's not directly King related, but I think there's enough of a Kevin Bacon Degrees of Separation connection there that it's worthy of talking about that series a little bit more in depth, because I really do feel it's a classic myself.
I'm actually looking forward to revisiting it and finding out if I still feel that way about it. So yeah, I'd be up for that.
All right, cool. We'll keep that in mind, and listeners, for you as well. So if you listeners have any different opinions about anything that we've talked about, please, when I post this episode, feel free to comment in the comment section. This will go up at Lilia's Library, as well as the regular Libsyn webpage. And yeah, it's still heady times. King turns 72, I want to say 71, 72.
I think 72.
72. And somebody asked him when he's going to retire. And he says, God will let me know when I'm going to retire. So I'm hoping that won't be for a while yet.
Yeah. Frankly, even if I only enjoy the new book as much as I enjoyed The Institute, I would happily read 2 of those a year for the next 20 years.
Very good. Very good. All right, Bryant, it's been great talking to you again. Thanks for coming on again.
You betcha. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, man. I'll let you go. You gotta work today, or?
No, sir. I am off today, and I plan to squander it.
Well, you've made a good start by talking to me.
All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.